The Trump administration took a big step today toward fulfilling a central campaign promise by endorsing an immigration reform bill crafted by Senators Tom Cotton and David Perdue. The bill would sharply restrict immigration based simply on family reunification and instead give priority to immigrants who have skills, who speak English, who might help the country. It would also cut future legal immigration by 50%, bringing the number closer to historic levels. It would also abolish something called the diversity lottery. Oh, the White House press corps hated it. Polling shows the public liked it. The White House rolled it out today in the briefing room, and there was quite an exchange. Watch this interchange between Stephen Miller, the White House top policy advisor, and Jim Acosta of CNN, who started off by implying this bill somehow, for reasons he didn't quite explain, must be racist. Watch.
This whole notion of, well, they could learn, they have to learn English before they get to the United States. Are we just going to bring in people from Great Britain and Australia?
Jim, actually, I have to honestly say, I am shocked at your statement that you think that only people from Great Britain and Australia would know English. It reveals your cosmopolitan bias to a shocking degree that in your mind, no, this is an amazing moment. This is an amazing moment that you think only people from Great Britain or Australia would speak English is so insulting to millions of hardworking immigrants who do speak English from all over the world. Jim, have you honestly never met an immigrant from another country who speaks English outside of Great Britain and Australia? Is that your personal experience?
Of course there are people who come.
But that's not what you said, and it shows your cosmopolitan bias. And I just want to say,
it sounds like you're trying to engineer the racial and ethnic flow of people into this country.
Jim, that is one of the most outrageous, insulting, ignorant, and foolish things you've ever said.
Ouch. Well, apparently undeterred, Jim Acosta rooted through his bag of cliches and came up with, presto, the old Statue of Liberty trick. What do you think of that, Stephen Miller?
The Statue of Liberty has always been
let me ask you a question.
Of hope to the world for people to send
do you believe,
people to this country, and they're not always going to speak English, Stephen. They're not always going to be highly skilled. They're not always going to be
I appreciate your speech. Jim, I appreciate your speech, so let's talk about this.
It was a modest
Jim, let's talk about this. In 1970, when we let in 300,000 people a year, was that violating or not violating the Statue of Liberty law of the land? Tell me what years meet Jim Acosta's definition of the Statue of Liberty poem Law of the Land. So you're saying 1 million a year is the Statue of Liberty number. 900,000 violates it, 800,000 violates it.
Well, you won't be surprised to learn that Acosta did not have a specific number in mind. Actually, even a general number to within, say, several hundred thousand. He had no idea at all, none. And yet he kept talking, which turned out to be a mistake.
We've had periods of very large waves, followed by periods of less immigration and more immigration. And during we've had
a period of immigration right now. The president wants to build a wall. You want to bring about a sweeping change to
surely, Jim, you don't actually think that a wall affects green card policy. You couldn't possibly believe that, do you? Actually, the notion that you actually think immigration is a historic law. The foreign-born population in the United States today, Jim,
staff on Monday talking about how border crossings.
Do you really? I want to be serious, Jim. Do you really at CNN not know the difference between green card policy and illegal immigration?
We can answer that question. No, they don't know the difference. Jim Acosta and the network he works for don't know much at all about this subject. They don't know how many immigrants come here every year or how. They don't have any clue as to how many should come, ideally. They know very little about the economic effect those immigrants have on Americans who already live here because they don't care enough to find out. They're utterly ignorant on the subject of immigration, and yet, and here's the amazing part, they are still filled with absolute moral certainty and boundless self-righteousness. They are buffoons, in other words, the drunk guy at the party with bad breath who won't stop talking.
This whole notion of, well, they could learn, they have to learn English before they get to the United States. Are we just going to bring in people from Great Britain and Australia?
Jim, actually, I have to honestly say, I am shocked at your statement that you think that only people from Great Britain and Australia would know English. It reveals your cosmopolitan, bias to a shocking degree that in your mind, no, this is an amazing moment.
Sounds like you're trying to engineer the racial and ethnic flow of people into this country.
Jim, that is one of the most outrageous, insulting, ignorant, and foolish things you've ever said, and for you that's still a really... The notion that you think that this is a racist bill is so wrong and so insulting.
The president claims that the bill is going to reduce poverty and increase wages, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But, Tim, what was your takeaway from what happened yesterday, other than saying, why don't we get cameras out of the press room?
Yes, it was a very spirited debate between two very spirited ideologues on the issue of immigration, and one of those very spirited ideologues happened to be a supposedly objective news reporter for CNN, Jim Acosta. I thought both of them were too rude and too personal, but this is how Trump. This is why people hate the press. Acosta going in there and saying that because of Emma Lazarus's poem, it's un-American to require immigrants to speak English. Forget about how Steve Miller got personal and obnoxious there. The fact is that Acosta's putting out an argument that very few people hold. He's putting it out sort of obnoxiously, and Miller's standing up there, knows immigration policy much better than any reporter I know. And so I just thought it was let me put it this way. Stephen Miller could have done better. Acosta could not have done worse.
John Podhoretz yesterday, John Podhoretz on Twitter yesterday, I forget your exact tweet, but it was something like, Jim Acosta is doing so horrifically today that I can't believe I agree with him.
No, it was something like, it was like I agree with Jim Acosta, and he's destroying his own argument with his comportment.
So what did you mean by that?
What I mean is that, like, I tend, I'm a grandson of immigrants. I find it very hard to take a restrictionist policy, because if my grandparents hadn't come in, they would have been murdered by the Nazis, and so it's discomforting to me. But having a reporter yammer at a White House official by quoting Emma Lazarus's a poem at the base of the Statue of Liberty as though that's the basis for policy, something written in 1883, and we're living in 2017, and like keeping going. That was part of it. It was so obnoxious. Like, fine, you know what? If Acosta, no, I mean Miller's obnoxiousness you just showed, which was him saying you're ignorant and stupid and foolish. That wasn't the moment that Acosta, I think, went into terrible territory. Was like lecturing Miller, quoting a poem that he doesn't know, so it from his notebook, as though this were like a debate between him and a public official, as opposed to being a journalist who was trying to tease out the difficulties and problems with the proposal. Which would have been perfectly fine if he'd asked him a substantive question about restriction in English and how immigrants. Many people, studies show that an immigrant can learn English in 6 months.
And Jim Acosta should meet someone from Jamaica. I mean, I'm from New York. I know lots of people from Ghana, from foreign countries that speak English. I know lots of people learning English
1.5 billion people on Earth, it is said. 1.5 billion speak English,
and they're not mostly in the UK.
Where things seemed to really melt down was when Jim Acosta talked, and we're certainly not putting this on Jim Acosta. You can watch the clip and choose sides, or just say, as Tim said afterwards, maybe we shouldn't have TVs in the press room after all. But when Jim Acosta used the language of, it seems like your policies are trying to engineer racial and ethnic percentages or something, it sure sounded like something that you would read out of like Mein Kampf or something. I mean, talking about it looks like you're like engaged in racial engineering and ethnic engineering, or something that we would have accused the Serbs of doing back in the early 1990s. At that point, it went off the rails.
Well, this is all of a piece. The policy that the Trump administration announced yesterday, the president's crackdown on Latino gangs. He's planning, from what I'm told, to start talking more about building the wall. Trump is pivoting back to the base in a very hard and direct way.
You're saying he's going to build the wall?
And Mexico is going to pay for it. But I know after that exchange with Jim Acosta yesterday, they were high-fiving each other behind.
Yes. I mean, Jim Acosta A huge
behind the
favor
scenes
for the base, because that's not only feeding into the narrative about the policy, feeds into the narrative about the press.